We also, just to give you a number, we invest almost 1 million Swiss francs every day in our infrastructure. So we invest 1 million Swiss francs in projects every working day. Our project portfolio is more than 200 million, so there's a little bit more than 200 working days in a year. So that's how we got to that 1 million. And to be able to do that, you need to have the size and the profitability that's required. When I started working, one of the key criteria was always, okay, what's the salary going to be? And that was definitely in the top 10, if not very high on the top 10. If you now talk to younger people with new skills and capabilities that we might need in our organization to augment our very strong existing workforce, then things like purpose, diversity, sustainability, those are topics which are much more important for the new employee, I would almost say. And therefore we need to focus on that also to make sure that we live up to their expectations. Yeah, that's an interesting topic because trust means many different things to many different people. But in the end, it is about people feeling protected in the organization, feeling that they are there to add value, to explore, to bring the best of themselves to the work. To the workplace. That's really, if people feel that that's the case, they can come with new ideas. They are listened to, not only to the senior people, but also to the junior people. If something goes wrong, we don't fire people, but we actually sometimes even get them into the quarterly town halls to talk about what we did, why it didn't work, what we learned from it, and so almost celebrating when something goes wrong.
Welcome to The Best Advice, learning from thinkers and doers. I'm Frank Arnold, and with my guests I talk about extraordinary achievements, their insights, and the best advice my guest ever got. I want to learn something from my guests and learn firsthand about an interesting industry. If you too would like to learn something from these exciting personalities, you're very welcome. Jos Dijsselhof joined SIX in January 2018 as CEO. He holds a degree in computer science and business administration, and he has a long track record in the international management in the financial sector. In September 2021, Jos Dijsselhof was elected as chairman of the World Federation of Exchanges Working Committee. SIX operates the infrastructure for the financial centers in Switzerland and Spain, thus ensuring the flow of information and money between the financial players around the world. SIX is owned by around 120 national and international financial institutions. We talk about his major current challenges, his passion for people and corporate culture, and the trends in the financial industry. I ask him what has surprised him most in the last 2 years and what new habits and beliefs he has adopted during this time. And of course, I want to learn about the best advice he ever got. Please enjoy the video and podcast, The Best Advice, Learning from Thinkers and Doers. Jos, thank you so much for taking the time.
You're welcome, happy to be here.
Jos, my first question is, what fascinates you to work in your industry and why are you motivated to work for SIX?
Thank you. The industry I work in, what we call the capital markets infrastructure industry, is on a crossroad. It is a traditional industry with data businesses, payment businesses, stock exchange business, which has been very, very old. Stock exchanges have been in existence for 400 years. But it's very technology heavy and platform heavy. So this whole industry is transforming more and more into a platform-based industry, technology-based industry, with its role within the financial industry, with the banks, with other players, the end customers, investors, issuers. So it's a whole transformation that the industry is going through, and based on a lot of technology, which is one of my passions. So that's why I think it fascinates me to be there. And SIX is really a company that's right in the middle of all of this. SIX is the infrastructure company for Switzerland, but also a very international company. And we can drive the transformation, and that's why I came here, to make a difference and to drive a transformation.
And what are the overarching goals for SIX, and how is SIX set up?
Yeah, we are now the third largest financial market infrastructure company in Europe, and just in the top 10 internationally. And we have a portfolio. You asked about how are we set up. with three distinct businesses. So we think that business mix of having three distinct businesses and having enough size to compete in the industry is really important. So that is the overarching goal for us, to be a competitive, internationally competitive capital market infrastructure company in terms of size, in terms of revenue, in terms of ability to invest, in terms of technology capabilities. So really to be a competitive company in this transforming business, where also it becomes more and more the winner, or a very small number of companies will be the winners in the end. So being of size, being part of the consolidation in the industry is extremely important. So that's the overarching goals. And then if I look at our businesses, the stock exchange, that's really about making sure that all the investors and the issuers can raise money and can invest in money on a really efficient platform. That price formation, speed of transactions, finality of transactions, all these things are happening really well. And we're now stretching that more and more to make the stock exchange also more accessible for small and medium-sized companies. So it's really important for us that we play our role in actually being a strong facilitator of the economical growth in the companies that countries that we operate in. So this heart of the financial industry, helping companies to grow through the stock exchange, that's what we really thrive for, on one hand. On the other hand, we see a big transformation there to digital assets. So blockchain, tokenization, these topics are very important for us. So we are investing heavily into a new infrastructure in that space. Second business is data business. There we have been accumulating data from our own businesses and others for many, many years, and then distributing that to our customers. But we see that the customers are more and more demanding. They want more data, they want different types of data, they want ESG data, they want diversity data. It becomes much broader. So we are adding more and more data sets to our business. And we are using technology, clouds, APIs, to distribute the data in a more efficient and effective way to our customers. That's the second business. And then thirdly, we run all the important payment infrastructures in Switzerland. We do the Swiss franc clearing on behalf of the National Bank. We manage the ATMs in Switzerland. All the debit card processing is going through our systems. E-billing is all going through our systems. And there we really want to optimize this infrastructure for Switzerland, so that Switzerland is competitive and that the Swiss franc is competitive in terms of its capabilities to the euro and other currencies, and that also the customers in Switzerland have a good user experience.
And with this complex organization, what is your biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge is to not be, let's say, on the losing end of this transformation. So we really want to be on the forefront and help drive transformation. And within that, therefore, the biggest challenge, because in the end it's all about people, the biggest challenge is to make sure we have the right people, we attract the right people into our organization, we develop the people that are within our organization, we collaborate, we work more and more as an open system to work with partners and fintechs and other companies. So the way we use and build our human resources, I would almost say, is the biggest challenge. And that's where we're competing with many other industries who need good technologists or a good market let's say, knowledge and understanding. Where we're competing with banks, we're competing with other international infrastructure companies, we're competing with payment providers who are all getting bigger. The crypto world is attracting a lot of good people also away from our business. So it's a very competitive environment. And that's the key to our success, I think, the people.
Jos, an additional question I wanted to ask you is, you're a very large organization, you have 4,000 employees. How do you drive innovation in a large and very professional organization?
Yeah, that's a challenge. When I made an assessment on how we work as an organization, I more or less came to the conclusion we are like a super tanker. So we're really good, but we're predictable and we know what our course is. But for the transformation and all the changes that are happening, we need to become like a flotilla of very small speedboats, to use that famous analogy. So innovation is really important. So we have tried to create clarity with our people to explain, okay, these are the processes which are the core deliveries that we do every day in terms of stock market or payments. Everybody wants to get the salary and make payments happen. And so these are areas where there's no room for failure and no tolerance for fallouts. But there are other areas where there's more room for experimenting and innovation. So we've declared basically zones and parts within our organization and our businesses where innovation is allowed. So that was the first step. Then secondly, we've of course created a process on how to go from idea to perhaps a project, and then we help internal initiatives to progress through stage gates in an innovation process. But for innovation, the outside world is also extremely important. And that's why we have an incubator and accelerator company called F10, where small 2-3 people companies can come, apply to be part of the program. Not everybody makes it, but you can apply and you can be part of the program. It's international submissions. We have people from Brazil, from the US, and a lot from Switzerland, of course, who have an idea, and we then help to incubate that idea to a product, and then from a product to a market, and from a market to a business. So that's our incubation and acceleration, and we learn a lot about those companies and those type of people who have these great new ideas, and how we could potentially bring that then back into SIX. So this whole engagement with startups and fintechs through our incubator and accelerator F10 is really important. And then lastly, we also created a venture fund. So we have 50 million Swiss francs set aside to invest in startup companies, so that we support the great ideas that we see out there and the passion that people have for developing something with money. And then potentially, not all of them, but some of them will at some point in time also then become applicable to our business, and we might integrate them. But really, those are two great sources, the incubation and acceleration, and the investments that we make additional to the processes we have internally for innovation. And that's moving forward, but innovation is always going to be a topic which is a bit of a challenge, but so far so good.
Have you had transfers coming from the startups back into your organizations as well? The other way around?
We've done that 2 or 3 times now. We've also made some acquisitions where we actually took full ownership of some smaller companies. And there we always try to balance not to absorb these smaller initiatives and these great innovative ideas with the overall SIX force, and keep them a little bit separate to keep their freedom and their way of running. Of course, in terms of cybersecurity, these kind of things, they need to be integrated. But we have pockets where we have less governance and more freedom in the organization by integrating some of these companies or making acquisitions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how do you position yourself or SIX as an attractive partner for these fintech companies?
Yeah. No, and this fintech area is also where a lot of our future employees are coming from. So it's really important for us to have the right positioning of our company towards the outside world. And I always say we are one of the bigger fintech companies in Switzerland, internationally even. As I mentioned earlier, how much we invest on a daily basis into our infrastructure. So we have a stable business, very profitable, technology heavy, and we have created room within the organization to experiment and to grow. And this is a bit the positioning I like for SIX, like stable, highly successful company also financially. But when you join us for a lot of abilities and opportunities to experiment and do new things and learn new ways of working, or help to learn 6 new ways of working. So the engagement and the empowerment of our people is really important. That all comes together in what we then call our employee branding and the way we position ourselves in the market.
And do you see a trend, especially with younger people, things you have to provide in order to be a good or an attractive employer?
Yeah, I see that this changed a lot. When I started working, one of the key criteria was always, okay, what's the salary going to be? That was definitely in the top 10, if not very high on the top 10. If you now talk to younger people with new skills and capabilities that we might need in our organization to augment our very strong existing workforce, then things like purpose, diversity, sustainability, those are topics which are much more important for the new employee, I would almost say. And therefore we need to focus on that also to make sure that we live up to their expectations. And working from home, remote working, collaborating, not being stuck in one department for the whole month or year, but actually being more transient and working in teams, more agile. These things are much more important for people now than they were when I started working. It's a big shift.
And you had a very large acquisition with the Spanish stock exchange. And I suppose this strongly affected your culture as well. Could you elaborate a bit on that acquisition?
Yeah.
I would be very curious to know also on the aspect what you talked about with the younger people and integrating the two cultures.
Yeah. Yeah, the acquisition of the Spanish exchange was the biggest single acquisition that SIX has ever done in its whole history, and we exist since 2008. So it's really a material change to the company. We were a real Swiss-anchored company with international business, but the core Swiss. Now we've added some 800 people from Spain to our organization. We're not only managing the Swiss stock exchange now, but also the Spanish stock exchange. So we have two markets to serve, I would say, and two sets of stakeholders in terms of government, the banks in two countries, and then our international business. So for us to transform to focusing on our previous business and now becoming a really international business is a big difference. We are also seen now by the industry as a real international company. We see it in our conversations. Of course, we have one leg in the EU now, which is also handy in terms of options and way to do business. But the biggest trick there is, again, coming back to what you asked earlier, is to integrate the people. And we've done this acquisition in the middle of Corona. So to integrate people who have worked in a, let's say, more Spanish-based company for the bigger part of their career, and people who've worked in a Swiss-based company for the bigger part of their career, to bring them together technically on the screen is easy. Getting the Zoom calls and the Teams calls going is easy. Talk about the business was easy, but to start to understand each other better, to understand the cultural differences, the differences in the way people do business, that is the challenging phase we're now really in. I must say both sides of the two parts of what we integrate, so the Swiss side and the Spanish side, are extremely excited because we feel and we know we can learn from each other, but we also will have to be open to understanding each other's differences. And in general, we are very much a process and planning organization. So we like to have a process for most of the things that we do and have a lot of structured planning. On the Spanish side, it's more perhaps people-driven, and they have specialists who work on topics without too much planning and a bit more agile perhaps even, but also less certainty of outcome. But they somehow always seem to find their way to get there. And to bring those two cultures together is a challenge. The Spaniards feel they're overwhelmed with process, and our Swiss part of the organization feels, hey, why are these Spanish colleagues not organizing themselves a bit more? So it's just one example of a cultural difference, but that's what we try to bring together now. We do workshops, we explain each other's culture at high level, and then try to at least create more understanding, and then hopefully at some point in time also to be able to really use the different cultures to our benefit. That's what we're trying to achieve.
That was a question I was about to ask. Did you already see benefits from integrating the two cultures that are obviously quite different?
Yeah.
Are there already benefits that you notice after this short time?
We see, of course, when you do an acquisition, you always have to explain to your shareholders that you're going to make a business case out of it. So delivering the synergies in a structured, predictable way, that's what was our core already. That's working really well. But what we see in the discussions between the Swiss and the Spanish colleagues, or the American and Spanish colleagues, we have people in many different countries in the end. What we see there is that the Spaniards have added a lot of new ideas to our thinking, because of course we were thinking ourselves before the acquisition about what we could do without having the Spanish people in the room. Now that we're all in one organization, we can actually leverage from the discussions, the ideas, some people coming over here to Switzerland or people traveling to Spain. And I've seen now at least 10, 20 new ideas of where we can make revenue and do things better for our customers. So it's really coming together, the finality and the predictability of what we used to have at SIX already, and then a bit more creativity and bringing things together and thinking lateral from the Spanish side. That's working really well already.
And what surprised you most in the last 18 months?
Yeah.
Through this acquisition and also through the time of COVID, what surprised you most?
This surprises me time and time again, but this time again is the flexibility and the way people can deal with resistance in their life or changes in their life. We all think we are set in a certain way, we do things in a certain way. that's probably the best way, and it cannot be done different. I was a big fan of always traveling and physical meetings, and I didn't like to use videos too much. But even myself, I now understand much better what the capabilities are and how we can do business for certain things through video remote, working from home, and where we need to be in the same room, and where we do a more iterative or a more creative process where the physical proximity is important. So I think we've all learned to cope with this situation in a really positive way. Our normal business as usual has worked flawless. We had no problems, nowhere. Everybody all of a sudden started working from home, almost 90% of our people or even more. And we've also progressed on projects. So people find ways to use the whiteboards in the tools that we have and to co-create things. So I'm really impressed how people have dealt with this change of situation. And many of us, including myself, have worked for many, many years coming to the office and doing the business there, or traveling to another country and doing the business there. And now all of a sudden we have to do it differently, and we all can. So the flexibility and the determination to continue with our business was really surprising. Whether that's sustainable in the long run, I don't think so. I think we have to get more people back to the office, and we need to find a better mix. But so far, I'm really impressed, really impressed.
And are there trends that you're noticing that you think are important to your industries?
Yeah, I think the biggest trend I see is that it's all about volume. We have a fixed cost business, so we have platforms, IT platforms, a bit like Netflix or Amazon. We have platforms, and the more volume you put on those platforms, the healthier your business will be. And because it's a competitive industry, prices are continuously under pressure, and you need more volume to still be profitable. So big transformation is consolidation. That's why we bought the Spanish exchange. That's why you see some other capital markets infrastructure companies buying other exchanges or data businesses or payment businesses to get a bigger scale and to be able to compete with the heavy technology-driven industry. We also, just to give you a number, we invest almost 1 million Swiss francs every day in our infrastructure. So we invest 1 million Swiss francs in projects every working day. Our project portfolio is more than 200 million, so there's a little bit more than 200 working days in a year. So that's how we got to that 1 million. And to be able to do that, you need to have the size and the profitability that's required. So that's one trend. Second trend is diversification. So stock exchanges used to be only stock exchanges. But we have a data business, and we also have a payment business. The data business and the payment business together are, I would say, 40% of our total business already. So we have a more diversified portfolio, and a single business line is also no longer the future. So you need to bring things together. And then, of course, data is now it's the new goal. So all the data from all your businesses, to bring that together, to deliver that to your customers in a way that they can use it, they can gain insights and make decisions. That's the third trend and transformation I see.
Jos, you've just mentioned a couple of trends. What are a couple of big projects that you're about to start or that you have started to address those trends?
Thank you. We have many projects in SIX, and a couple of big ones are to mention. This first one is building this new exchange on blockchain. So we are building a completely new exchange based on blockchain to integrate a lot of the processes that are currently separated. So in the current setup, you can raise capital, you can do trading, then the transactions that are traded are being netted, and then they are settled. On blockchain, you can do all of that on the blockchain in one go. So it will create a much more efficient process, and you can also trade more different types of investment opportunities, like real estate or art or a digital version of a Novartis or Roche share. So that will really is an investment to make our industry extremely more efficient, technology heavy. We're also investing a lot in cloud and APIs to connect our customers more efficiently to our infrastructure, so that the data and the transactions, their orders, everything can be more seamlessly integrated into their systems and into our systems. And then we do many other technology projects in our overall investment portfolio. But actually the biggest project that we really drive is our cultural transformation. because that underpins everything. Without the right culture and the right way of working, all these projects will not yield the benefit that we're looking for. So we started 3 years ago our cultural journey. We call it Six Spirit, because it's about changing the spirit of our people and the way they work in our company. And just it is more complex, but in terms of a couple of highlights, Six is a very regulated, predictable, dependable, high quality organization, always been. We need to keep that. But we also need more empowerment at the lower levels, because Six was very hierarchical. When I started as a CEO, I had to sign off so many things which I felt that's much better done at a different level in the organization. So we're pushing down empowerment a lot. Ownership and empowerment is one of our core values. Second is that Six had a bit of a monopoly in the past. So the customer focus was limited compared to more edgy commercial organizations. So customer focus is something we really try to bring in so that people understand in the end there's a customer there, the customer pays our bills, and that's where our salary comes from and where the return of investment of our shareholders is coming from. So we're really pushing that. And then collaboration. Six used to have fairly siloed business lines, and of course things are now much more integrated. Doing a transaction on the stock exchange will create data which we then sell in our data business, and will create a payment which is then in our other business. So these things are coming more and more together, again through the lens of a customer. So collaboration is something we're really pushing, and then of course trust. So really create an environment where people feel they can show themselves, where they can experiment, where they can also fail every once in a while and learn from it and then move on. So trusting each other and trusting our own capabilities internally and trusting our customers. That's another big theme in our cultural transformation. And we do that by myself being very engaged. This is really my project. The culture of the organization, I think, is the most important thing a CEO can, together with the whole team and with all the people, of course, really influence it in the organization. But we also do that laterally through the organization, through different platforms and groups, sounding boards and people boards, to really make sure that we get the energy and the impulses from within the organization, and then with some top-down steering, we're really investing in changing the culture. And we see that it's so important because it unlocks energy with our existing people. It keeps people longer with the company. It gives people a more rich career because they can move around a bit better. They can do new things where they thought, okay, I can do this really well now. For the rest of my career, I will continue to do this, but they can switch to other projects. And of course, it's also very necessary to attract new people. That's a big challenge for us.
Jos, could you give an example on what you do exactly to enhance customer focus, as this is a topic that is very important to a lot of executives?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think there's always leading by example. So when I started, I'm not the kind of person who sits in an office, reads all the reports and then makes some notes and then sends all the reports back and that's it. I spend a lot of my time with customers to understand what they are looking for. What do they like about our company and our services? What do they not like? How are they developing their business, and how can we work with them to develop the business? If banks have certain needs for certain assets or certain payment types or new data types, then through these conversations we can already early identify that and then build services to match that. So a lot of leading by example for myself and the senior management team, but also in all the processes now. If you start a new project, first question in the, let's say, the project brief always has to be, what is the impact for customers? How are we going to make sure that we really understand what the customers are looking for? How are we going to make sure that the user experience of the customer is really dealt with, and not only just the capability to do something, but also to focus on really pleasing or satisfying the needs of the customer. So in the culture, in processes, in the way we design products, in the way we approve new products and investments, you see the customer now coming through everywhere. And then of course you see gradually people starting to understand, hey, if we meet the customer needs better, we get more excitement with our customers, we get more business. So it's in the long run also, of course, in the end, the only way you can be successful. And that's gradually coming through in the organization. Stock exchanges and payments and others used to be a bit more monopoly and country based. Now it's much more open for competition and more international, and that's why we have to also bring this customer focus in to be successful going forward.
And the value of trust. You've mentioned this a couple of times and we've talked about it before. What do you do to enhance trust in your organization, especially after the challenging merger that you're currently facing?
Yeah, that's an interesting topic because trust means many different things to many different people. But in the end, it is about people feeling protected in the organization, feeling that they are there to add value, to explore, to bring the best of themselves to the workplace. That's really, if people feel that that's the case, they can come with new ideas. They are listened to, not only to the senior people, but also to the junior people. If something goes wrong, we don't fire people, but we actually sometimes even get them into the quarterly town halls to talk about what we did, why it didn't work, what we learned from it, and so almost celebrating when something goes wrong. Those are, I think, are all tokens and ways of increasing trust. But of course, trust is a very deep emotion within human beings. So it's also understanding each other. It's also being more people-oriented. We used to have a lot of, and we still have, but we are trying to transform a lot of, let's say, processes and procedures on how to deal with certain HR topics or other topics. Whereas we try to move from managers to more people-oriented leaders in our organization. We have a big Rethink Leadership program to enhance the focus that we all should have on people and the time we spend with people. And when you start a meeting, that you also every once in a while ask, let's do a check-in. How are you doing? What's going on with you? Are you in a good place or a more difficult place? Or so this people orientation, I think, is very important with trust, because if people feel that there is an interest by the company in themselves as an individual, then they start feeling more trust, and that's really important.
You mentioned that you displayed failures publicly in town hall meetings even. What are your experience with that?
Yeah, it's a bit uncomfortable because nobody likes to talk about something which didn't go that well. But I think if you really use it as an opportunity to learn and to say, okay, how can we next time prevent this? What can we do to enhance when we start an initiative or something of a new project or whatever we do next time? So it's a learning moment instead of a judgment moment. Then it can work really well, but it requires courage. It requires courage from the individuals. It requires courage from the managers to say, oh, something went wrong in my area, in my department. And that requires a bit of encouragement. That doesn't happen from by itself. And of course, I think in general in the Western cultures, admitting failure is not such a natural thing to do. But that's something which I think in the end will yield benefits, because your learning moments, people feel trust. They think, oh, wow, I've done something wrong, and instead of being kicked out of the company, I get put on stage. Of course, we don't encourage everybody to make many mistakes or make multiple mistakes at the same time, but it is such a powerful way of looking at mistakes to transform it into a learning experience.
So looking at your experience with displaying those failures, would you recommend it to other organizations as well?
Highly recommend it. Because I think even in our pre-discussion we discussed no company is perfect. In every company things go well, but other things don't go that well, and to admit that things don't go well or that things didn't work out the way you planned it is such a powerful means to engage your people. And if people feel, okay, I've tried it, but now I move on to the next one. I've learned. Management has seen that I've actually tried something, which is also not always so evident. So I think it yields a lot of benefit, but it's not easy. Yeah.
And what is the biggest area that you're curious about, and why?
As you can hear the way I talk, I'm very curious about people, how people think, how people work. When I came a bit more than 3 years ago to Switzerland, I was very curious to understand Swiss culture, the way people work in Switzerland and how companies are organized. Now with our Spanish colleagues, I love going there and talk to them and try to understand more and more how things are working there. So culture, people, motivation, what triggers people, what makes people come to work with excitement, and or what makes people frustrated at work. These are the topics which I'm extremely curious about on one side, and on the other side, deep down, I'm still also a technologist. So I like to understand new technology. What is blockchain really? What is data analytics really? So that part of me being a technologist will never go away also.
And how do you continue to learn and to stay on top of things?
Yeah.
You personally?
Well, I learn a lot from conversations and talking to people. Like even today, you always learn so much by talking with people and exchanging insights. I do try to read. I would love probably to read more things off topic from outside work, but I try to read a lot about what's going on in our industry, books, and make sure that I'm on top of the knowledge side of things. And then I also experiment every once in a while. I try a new way of presenting a topic in a town hall, and that sometimes also fails. And then also the next time I need to invite myself to talk about the fail. So I like to experiment a little bit with behavior and the way you approach things. And perhaps that's also, I've been around the world a little bit. I'm Dutch by origin, worked in the Netherlands, in the UK, worked in Singapore, in Hong Kong. Then before I joined SIX, worked for a company which was very Paris-based, and now here. So this curiosity of understanding different dimensions and different ways of how the world works is always going to be with me.
Is there a belief or habit that you've changed in the last, let's say, 2 years or 3 years?
Yeah. I think the belief that you have to holistically look at things in life. I don't want to get too spiritual, but I think balance, every once in a while doing something physical or doing something mental or doing something which is outside your work environment or even outside your family life, and creating some time for yourself. This holistic approach to being a human being is, I think, I'm not a specialist in this. I'm probably not as far as many other people are, but that's something which I think has changed, and therefore also I'm better at saying, okay, now this afternoon or this evening or this weekend, no work, I have to do time with the family, or I go on a bike ride, or I go onto the Herzlich to do some hiking, or I read a book on a topic which has nothing to do with my business, which I'd still like to do more, but I try to. Yeah.
Was there a rewarding investment? It could be investment of time or money or engagement in the last 2 years that relates to that?
Yeah. There are many different investments, but I really value time with my kids, 2 boys. Mm-hmm. So do sports with them, or go on the lake and go with our boat out for a while. I like to play golf. Golf is very fascinating because the game is almost, golfers will hate me for this, it's almost a byproduct. Because the real thing you do is you walk with somebody or with some other people. You walk for 6 kilometers if you do 18 holes, and you have time to talk. There's nothing else, there's no screen, there's nothing, there's nature. And so if I go out with my sons and I talk about how are things at school, then they talk about school, but they talk about their friends or a potential girlfriend, or the conversations are so much richer. So that time investment, although golf is a time-intensive sport, mm-hmm. The time investment is really great to connect with them.
And were there people you've worked with that inspired you, or people that you've learned from?
Yeah.
In your past?
My first 3 bosses were ladies, women. And they learned me a lot about not only the content and knowledge, but also how you work together. How do you manage a team? How do you not only interact on the task, but also on the person? And so I think I've been formed by my first couple of managers or team leaders a fair bit. And then, of course, later on in my career, you always meet some people which are just so inspiring. There used to be a gentleman in a Dutch bank I worked for who was in the board of directors. He could make the most complicated topics so simple. He would always go back to the core. What are we really talking about? What is the real topic we're discussing here? And by bringing it together in a more simplified and core way, then you see the solution immediately. And this gentleman had this fantastic skill to do that. In a very complex world, he could bring it down to the core. And that's something I've been aspiring to. I'm not as good as he was in this, but I try to. And it's very powerful, because if you get to the core, if you continue to ask the why, what, or the open questions, and you get to really what is the real essence of the problem or of the opportunity that you have in front of you, then the solution is so much clearer, and a lot of cloud and distractions will disappear. And that was a really inspiring person.
You're a very curious person. What would you make, or what would you like to make more time for?
Yeah, I would like. The technology is still such an important topic for me. I would like to further investigate new technologies, what's on the horizon, how are things working. I would like to spend more time with fintechs and other companies to understand how they are developing their business. But I'm also interested in, like I said, in mankind, in some spiritual topics, inspirational topics. So I would like to actually spend a bit more time on these topics also, next to work and family and sports and these kind of things, but more on topics which are a bit further away and have to do with mankind and the way we develop as human beings. Oh.
As a closing,
because we're all in the rat race, and we all are always feeling under pressure, actionless, time, and we don't take enough time to stand still every once in a while, observe what we're doing as people and how we treat the planet, or how we deal with diversity, or how we deal with sustainability, or what are the real problems and how can we solve them. I think it's worthwhile for us to spend a bit more time instead of just money, to be honest. Yeah.
Do you have a personal mechanism to interrupt you, to spend time on those topics?
The biggest personal mechanism is my wife, who every once in a while says, Jos, I can see, even when I talk to you at the dinner table, I can see your head is in the game instead of in life. So she stops me and says, come on, let's go, let's walk the dog, let's have a talk. So she's the biggest mechanism, I would say, in staying balanced and giving me warning signals when I go a little bit off track.
That's very, very good. Is there, as we're closing the interview, I would like to ask you, the last question is, was there best advice, or what was the best advice that you ever got?
Yeah. People. So the advice that others have given me, invest in people, understand your people, really use the capabilities and the skills that you have, but also experiment and give. There's a bit of this rule mentally I have in my brain that everybody needs to have a job that's bigger than their capabilities, so they can grow, make people work together. So people is such an essential ingredient. If you don't focus enough on that, I think you miss the boat a bit. And the second thing is this tendency in the world that we want to now, especially now with so much data, we want to be precise about everything. So we want to calculate everything. We want to know to 4 or 5 decimals behind the comma how precise we can be. Where actually in 99% of the decision making, if you know roughly 80% and you know a bit the core of the problem, 80-20 is a big rule for me. That it just increases speed. You know 80% is right, go for it. If it doesn't work, you can always adapt it and then move on. And this preciseness and scientific overly use of data is has a pitfall. So I'm a really 80-20 person, and let's experiment and go for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And with the experience that you have today, is there an advice that you would pass on to the next generation or to younger people who are entering business life as they're about to approach their next steps?
I always have the philosophy that your job is about building experience, it's building capabilities, it's building skills. So it's not about the job itself only, it's not about getting to the next level only, it's not about getting the title. These things are, of course, also to some sort of extent important, but it's about continually putting experience into your rucksack. And therefore, if your company offers you to do something completely different than you've done before, go to another country than the country where you're born in and have lived in all your life. these kind of opportunities you should really embrace, because it stretches you. It will give you opportunities to learn new things about yourself. So continuous learning, investing in yourself is more important than focusing on salary, titles and all these kind of things, which in the end are not so relevant.
Jos, thank you very much. I always enjoy talking to you. Thank you for taking the time, and I'm very much looking forward to our next conversation.
Thank you, Frank. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for your interest. If you want to support us, subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot to attract fascinating guests. And of course, my guests and I are very happy about positive feedbacks and comments. If you enjoyed the podcast or the video, please share it with friends or family. Thank you. Until the next episode, all the best.